Hey guys, it's me, Mr.250, and welcome back to Umineko. So, a few more things I wanted to note. Since last time, over here in System, we have all of everybody's names back the way they were. So it's not the weird one with George and Shannon. And let me fix this while I'm at it. There we go. And the other thing is, I was shown the intro, the actual intro to the second, like the first and second intros to this game, the non-PS3 ones. And I mean, as much as I like the game, the art for the original PC one is pretty bad. And most of the characters are okay. I can deal with most of them. With the exception of George, and Maria, they're both kind of, like, derpy looking. All the other ones are pretty okay. They're a little bit low res and a little bit, simple, but they're okay. But those two in particular are just kind of weird. But anyway, now that that's all over, let's keep going with the story of George's family coming and visiting. Oh, and they're talking about Jessica right now. Recently, she'd clashed often with her mother, who was enthusiastic about her education. Oh, except clicking funny. Jessica, who was trying to leave the parlor in a bad mood, and Shannon, who was pushing a serving cart filled with tea, bumped into each other.
Oh, Shannon. 私の分のお茶はいらないぜ。私は庭でもほっつき歩いてくる。お嬢様?
シャノン、お茶が冷めます。配膳を急ぎなさい。
失礼しました。
Shannon hadn't actually done anything wrong. But Natsui, who was a jerk, who felt like some shame to herself had been shown, lashed out at her emotionally. This was something that often happened in the Yoshirimiya family. But it seemed that Shannon wasn't strong-willed enough to accept it that way. She shrunk back and prepared the black tea while cowering. She had the unfortunate habit of making more mistakes when she cowered. Her pitiful appearance dispersed the peaceful atmosphere that had been there until just a moment ago. That wasn't really Shannon's fault, but she thought she might be the source and felt a pressure on her chest. Her shaking fingers made the utensils clang, and you couldn't have complimented it as graceful. The more pitiful everyone thought that was, the greater the silence grew. The more irritated Natsui looked, and the more Shannon cowered. Shannon's thin neck felt like it was being suffocated and choked by the death god of tension. At that time, George spoke pleasantly, blowing away the stiff atmosphere.
これはいい香りだね。何の紅茶かな？
これは。
言わないで。当てるから。これは特徴的な匂いだから多分わかるよ。アールグレイかな？
多分そうだと思います。
多分アールグレイで合ってるよ。台所に戻ったら紅茶の缶を見てごらん。
ジョージ君は紅茶に詳しいのかね？
お世話になっている社長さんに紅茶の詳しい人がいまして、講釈を聞いているうちに少しだけわかるようになりました。
ああ、おこのぎ食品の社長さんかい。あの人、そういううんちくは得意やな。
紅茶の名前って産地を示すことが多いんでしょ？じゃあこれはアールグレイという土地で栽培されたのが由来なのかしらね。
昔イギリスにグレイ伯爵という人がいたそうで、その人にちなんでつけた名前だそうだよ。ちなみにこの特徴的な匂いは茶葉のものではなくて、ベルガモットというみかんの親戚にあたる果物でつけたものなんだって。
そうなの。初めて知りました。
Oh boy, me neither.
そういう知識を持っていると、紅茶もより美味しくいただけますね。
酒もタバコも同じや。 嗜好品はロマンをたしなむもんやで。こういううんちくが味わいを深めるんや。
薬の能書きと同じよね。夏日姉さんも愛用してる頭痛薬の説明書、今度はじっくり読んでから飲んでみなさいよ。
それはいい。今夜試してみなさい。
ええ、試してみます。
シャノちゃん、そのポットを開けてごらん。茶葉の中にベルガモットを乾燥させたものが混じっているのを見つけられるはずだよ。
はい、入っています。オレンジの皮を乾燥させたようなものが混じっています。
うん、多分これがベルガモットだね。アールグレイの香りの主成分だよ。匂いは鮮烈だから味がきつそうな印象があるけど、素直で飲みやすい味なんだよ。ミルクティーにすると香りもまろやかになって素敵かもしれないね。みんなに注いでポットに余った分があったら、ぜひミルクティーにして飲んでみるといいよ。
はい、ありがとうございます。
George gave her a small wink. Shannon finally realized that George had been doing her a favor by calming down the atmosphere in the room. And he had been doing it for her sake as she had cowered. The Ushirimiya family did not pamper their servants. So if there was any awkwardness, they would be harshly punished. So it didn't often happen that they were given a helping hand like this. Thanks to George's concern, Shannon was somehow able to get a hold of herself and finish serving everything safely. If she was calm when she worked, she could easily carry out her tasks elegantly and flawlessly. When the black tea was laid out on the table and the elegant scent drifted around, the room was completely back to how it had been, in a peaceful mood as everyone praised George's knowledge. Shannon wanted to thank him for saving her, but it didn't look like she would get the chance. So she at least thanked him inside her heart, praying to God that George would hear it and push the serving cart away.
George 兄さんは昔からそういう時には助け舟を出してくれるんだよ。話題をさらりと変えてくれるというかさ。
Shannon and Jessica could be seen in the rose garden. Jessica, who had gotten into a fight with her mother, still hadn't returned to the parlor, and was nonchalantly killing time like this.
思い返せば、こういう助けられ方をしたのは今回が初めてじゃない気がします。
Whenever I made a careless mistake and George was there, he would always naturally smooth things over and make things harmonious, I think. Maybe it wasn't something as direct as picking up a fork that had been dropped, but that was his way of caring. Even servants have pride. They want to fix their own mistakes by themselves, because if a guest helped them out with that, they would lose face.
そういう空気を読むのが得意なんだろうぜ。ま、ジョージ兄さんの美学なんだろうよ。あの人、妙に気ざったらしいところあるからな。そんなことありません。とっても素敵な方だと思います。ひょっとしてシャノン。
Oh man. Oh man, Shannon. Shannon had uncharacteristically refuted Jessica's words forcefully, so Jessica had struck back. No, of course not.
そういや、ジョージ兄さんってあまり浮いた話を聞いたことないし。確か家庭的な子がタイプだとか前に聞いたかな。そりゃいいぜ、シャノンぴったりじゃん。私がですか？私にはそんな資格ありませんし。資格はあるぜ。何年も昔から顔を合わせてて、半ば幼馴染状態。互いに男女であることを意識しないナチュラルな関係ってのは、一度意識し始めるとトントン拍子らしいぜ。
Jessica loved teen magazines and this kind of story, and she was always getting excited talking about that kind of thing with her friends. So she was very sensitive to these kind of love stories. So this wasn't the first time Shannon had been exposed to this kind of story. But this was certainly the first time that she'd noticed George as a member of the opposite sex. She was furniture, and George was an honored guest connected to the Ushiyamiya family. She had thought that she wouldn't be allowed to even imagine any deeper relationship. So she hadn't thought of it. Jessica poked fun at it, even more happy that it was someone else's problem. Shannon was doing her best to make sure that her blushing cheeks weren't discovered. So if George had shown up at a time like that, there would be no way that she would be able to keep her cool. They saw George coming out from the entrance hall of the mansion. It looked like he had seen them as well. He headed over, waving his hand. Shannon had to frantically try and regain her ordinary composure before George reached them.
おじい様がやっと降りてきたよ。あとは大人たちの話になるからって追い出されて。
Boring adult conversations.
そりゃ抜け出して正解だよ。じい様の顔を拝むくらいなら疫病神にキスした方がマシだぜ。
そんな言い方は悪いよ。ただ、おじい様は僕らのことを疫病神だと思っているかもしれないね。何しろ、事業用にお金を借りたいという話でやってきたんだから。
That's right. This wasn't the customary annual October family conference. Eva's family had visited to apply for a business loan from the head family. Kinzo had vast resources, and he lent those out to his children. Of course, they did not borrow money because they were living in poverty. What kind of business would they expand, using the vast amount of money that they had borrowed? How much interest would be attached, and how long would they have to repay it? This wasn't a loan for those who didn't keep it. It was a loan for those who were on the offense. Kinzo strictly judged whether it was worth lending out his fortune, and afterwards, he strictly oversaw its use. So this spectacle where relatives visited Rokunjima and explained their business to Kinzo sometimes occurred. To the parents, it might be a situation where they were forced by nervousness to move a lot of money. But to Jessica, who lived on this isolated island called Rokunjima, it was a precious opportunity to meet up with her cousins. So being able to talk with the occasional guests such as George like this immediately cured her bad mood from getting into a fight with her mother a short while ago.
うちも全くケチくせえぜ。金なんて余ってるんだろうから気前よく貸してやりゃいいのによ。うちの親父もじい様もどうせねちっこくもったいぶってんだろうぜ。
お金を貸すとき慎重になるのは当然のことだよ。もちろんうちの父さんも借り入れた分で事業を拡大し、しっかり返却できるプランを持って訪れてる。あとはプレゼンテーション次第ってところだろうね。本当は脇で見させてもらって勉強したいんだけど、母さんに追い出されちゃったんだよ。ちょっと残念かな。
親方様はクラウス様やエヴァ様のことを今でも子供の頃と全く変わらないように叱られるようです。そんな姿を息子のジョージ様にきっと見せたくないのでしょう。
As Shannon hung her head, she thought back on a scene familiar to those who worked in the mansion. Even Cross, who acted haughtily towards his siblings, was still treated like a child by Kinzo. Shannon herself had often seen Kinzo slap Cross and tell him to sit upright. It was probably very embarrassing to be coerced like that at his age. In the Ushiyamiya family, taking care not to be in the same place when this happened was one of the great tasks of servants. However, that meant that every time Shannon was in the same place, it was a mistake.
そうだろうね。それを察して姿を消すのも子供の務めかな。それにしても今年もこの庭園の花は本当に素敵だね。
George stretched as he said that. And he smoothly changed the subject away from something that was a little gloomy. This time, Shannon noticed it too. This person, George, could sensitively figure out the situation, and always change the subject to something harmonious out of concern. It had been so smooth that Shannon hadn't noticed it until today. Today, Shannon had to really admire that behavior of George's. Almost all of the boys Shannon knew of her own age had been classmates during her education. But they were all young, and none of them had the composure that George did. Even though he had been just another guest until a while ago, today, she couldn't describe him with just that. But that was idle thinking compared to her work as a servant. Shannon tried to chase that away with a small shake of her head.
どうしたんだよ。いえ、なんでもありません。お茶のご用意をしましょうか。先ほどのアールグレイを改めてご用意します。
紅茶の名前覚えてくれたんだね。嬉しいよ。
さっきはお気遣いをありがとうございました。
Shannon was finally able to put her thanks into words. If you wrote it out, it wouldn't be very long. But Shannon had needed just a little courage to say that out loud. But George played dumb.
何のことだい？お礼を言われるような覚えはないけど。
It seemed that he was being a gentleman in his own way, saying that he hadn't helped her because he wanted to be thanked. It seemed that George's response had been more or less predictable to Jessica. Without thinking, she burst out laughing.
なあ、こういうところ気ざったらしいだろ。いえ、そんなことは。
Jessica made fun of Shannon as she remained silent, red-faced. George didn't know the details, but he naturally joined in, laughing the same way. The three of them lazily walked around the garden, talking about what was new. George, as the oldest cousin, talked about his life experiences. Jessica talked about recent life on Rokenjima. And Shannon talked about her recent work. They kept going on about these trivial things. Shannon, even if she found the other stories deeply interesting, didn't feel particularly connected to their contents. She was nothing more than a servant, and she had no intention of delving into her master's lives. She wanted them to enjoy their time speaking with her, and was only pretending to listen intently and not at the right moments. But for some reason, she found talking with George deeply interesting today. Even for things that she would normally ignore, she felt like she could feel a kindness hidden deep beneath her words. For some reason, she wanted to know more things about George, no matter how trivial. So, she stared fixedly at him. She thought that as far as looks went, this person, Ushiramiya George, was probably about average, and he didn't really stick out. But he was diligent, serious, and had a deep prudence which allowed him to understand people's hearts and show concern. But she had never been aware of these things until now. She might not have met him many times, but she had known his face for many years. Even so, she had not noticed once until now. So Shannon was embarrassed that she hadn't been able to notice, and she blushed. Maybe George thought that Shannon was listening to his stories intently, because he kept talking about himself. But Jessica didn't miss that slight change in Shannon. So she turned the discussion around to the topic Shannon wanted to hear about most.
そういやさ、ジョージ兄さん、いい加減に彼女とかはできたわけ？
なんだい、やぶから棒に。
Normally, just George's reaction would have been answer enough. But for some reason, as she was now, Shannon wouldn't be able to understand it unless he said it clearly.
ジョージ様はお優しいです。さぞや、 表になるだろうと。
Just gotta hear it directly said, exactly word for word.
その
よせよ、シャノン。そういう追い詰め方はかえって意地悪だぜ。私は別に意地悪のつもりは。
嬉しい勘違いをありがとう。残念だけど特定の一人の女性とはまだご縁がないよ。
Oh boy, he's open.
見ての通り容姿も並以下だからね。女の子を楽しくさせてあげられるような気の利いた話術もないし。
そんなことないと思います。それに男性の魅力は容姿では測れないところで決まるんじゃないかと思います。だからそのジョージ様はとても魅力的な男性じゃないかと思います。
Shannon was uncharacteristically verbose. Compared to how she normally was, this was very verbose. George looked fairly pleased about hearing his own charm as described, but he was just a little surprised at this high praise. Jessica, sure now that her own imagination was right on, acted as though she could barely hold back her laughter.
ありがとう、シャノンちゃん。僕に魅力を感じてくれるような寛大な女性に早く巡り会いたいね。
きっと巡り会えると思います。ジョージ様の本当の魅力に気づいている女性は、いえ、大勢いらっしゃると思いますよ。
Maybe she wanted to say that there is one really close. Shannon avoided saying that much, drawing a final line as a servant.
そうかな。さすがに照れるね。
Maybe he had never been praised this much by a girl. George's face had turned just as bright red as Shannon's. As she watched the two of them, Jessica giggled sadistically.
ジョージ兄さんもやがては素敵なパートナーと出会うだろうけどさ、今のままじゃきっと上手にパートナーをエスコートできないと思うぜ。勤勉でいらっしゃるようだけど、そっちのお勉強はからっきしみたいですよ。
悪かったね。その勉強はこれから少しずつしていくよ。
相手もいないのにどうやって？恋愛映画でも見る？それとも秀吉おじさんに習う？
まるで鬼の首でも取ったみたいだな。こういう話では男は女の子にかなわないね。
Normally, when George and Jessica got together, their parents would say, George is diligent and admirable, and Jessica's lazy and rude. So it was probably unbearable fun for Jessica when the roles were finally reversed. George also realized that, so this time, he was content with being the one who was teased.
ジョージ兄さんさえいいならさ、シャノンでちょっと練習してみたら？
Oh man, Jessica, you're like the complete wingman for her. Look at this. Oh man.
どうよ。お嬢様。
When she heard Jessica's audacious plan, Shannon's face turned bright red with a poof, and a donut of smoke started to rise around it.
それはとても魅力的な提案だけど、シャノンちゃんに悪いよ。彼女の貴重な休日を奪うだけじゃない。彼女が本当に思いを寄せる人と二人きりで過ごす聖域に僕が割り込んでしまうことになる。そんな無粋なことはできないね。
私も思い人とかそういう人はいませんので、そういうお気遣いは無用なのです。
Gosh, it's interesting while at the same time I'm just like, oh my gosh, you guys obviously like each other. Go on a date. Shannon's blood had all rushed to her head, and it looked like even she didn't know what she was babbling about. It seemed that Jessica, who knew how Shannon normally was, found that really comical. She couldn't hide her cackling laugh anymore.
そうなのかい？シャノンちゃんみたいな可愛い子が独り身なんて信じられないね。
私、使用人ですから、その男の方との縁なんてありませんし、その。ってことは、シャノンも将来素敵な男性を射止めるために交際の練習が必要だってことじゃないのかよ。つまり二人とも互いの思惑は一致するわけだ。
Obviously.
なるほど、こりゃいいぜ。
Jessica irresponsibly cheered the two of them on. Now, George was also hanging his head, red-faced.
ジョージ、さっきから呼んで
Eva,
る
you're
わよ。
ruining the moment!
聞こえないの？
Since Eva appeared in what was already an embarrassing situation, both of them were even more flustered. Jessica watched and laughed loudly.
母さん、ごめんよ、話が込み入っちゃっててね。気づかなかった。
これはエヴァ様、大変失礼しました。
若い子たち同士で大層盛り上がってたみたいね。あなたたちもみんなお年頃だもの。そういう話題が尽きないのもよくわかるわ。
嫌ですね。エヴァおばさんだってまだまだお若いじゃないですか。秀吉おじさんとの馴れ初めを聞かせてくださいよ。
あら、そんなの言えるわけないわよ。本当にみんな若いんだから。
それで何、母さん、用があって声をかけたんじゃないの？
お父さんたちの話が終わったわ。おじいさまにあなたの話をするからいらっしゃい。
Oh boy, that'll be
僕
fun.
の話？何の話かな？
今みんなでしてたのと同じ話よ。ほら、例の話。
あの話かい。別におじいさまに話すようなことじゃないんじゃないかな。
何の話だよ。まさかジョージ兄さん、誰かと結婚するの？それはおめでとうございます。
違うよ。特定の女性はいないってさっき言ったじゃないか。
威張ることじゃないでしょ。まったく。
Eva smiled bitterly, looking a little shocked.
わかった。ジョージ兄さん、あれでしょ。お見合いだ。
Oh boy.
お見合いですか。
Arranged marriage is fun.
まあね。
Surely, as a man, George wanted to find a partner by himself and take her back with him. So it seemed that he thought that it would be a bit shameless to meet his partner for the first time, in a marriage meeting arranged by his parents.
お見合いというのはもっと年齢が成熟してからするものじゃないのかな。僕はまだ一人前になったって自覚すらないというのに。
もちろん即結納即結婚なんて焦る気は全然ないのよ。親睦を深めて年齢的にもう少し落ち着いてから籍を入れる形でも問題ないの。
From Eva's forceful appearance and George's somewhat lazy one, the others could catch a glimpse of the scheme behind this marriage meeting. They didn't know who this other person was, but it was surely someone profitable to Eva's family in a business sense. This whole thing about having them have an engagement relationship until they changed registers to deepen the connection between the two families, that was a big sentence, felt almost like a political strategy.
結婚はね、好きになってからするものじゃないの。してから慣れることよ。感情だけで結婚すると必ず後悔する。身元のしっかりした人を生涯の伴侶に選んで、それから愛情を築いていくのも決して間違ったことではないの。
エヴァおばさん、それじゃ秀吉おじさんに悪いですよ。
私はあの人のこと大好きよ。いつまでも一緒にいて人生を共にしていきたい。
エヴァ様、素晴らしいです。 本当にご立派です。
ありがとう。でもその気持ちは二人で夫婦をしていくうちに育んだものよ。そして今の私たちより未来の私たちの方がもっともっと仲良しだと信じてる。私は夫婦はそういうものがいいと思ってるの。
だからって好きでもない相手と結婚してもいいって論法には。
だからって好きな相手なら誰と結婚してもいいという論法にはならないわ。結婚は一瞬。でもその後の夫婦生活はずっとずっと長いの。だから一時の感情に任せず慎重に相手を探すべきなの。そしてそれは人生経験の未熟なあなたよりお母さんたちの方がうまくやれるとは思わない？
それはそうかもしれないけど。
あなたは私の自慢の一人息子よ。どこへ出しても恥ずかしくないくらい立派に成長してくれたわ。バトラ君は籍を抜け、あなたが今やお父様の血を引く唯一の男孫。あなたにふさわしい相手は慎重に選ばなくてはならない。
As everyone related to the Ushirimiya family knew, Eva adored George so much that he was the apple of her eye. And I think this is probably a good spot to stop. I thought they were going to go into the house already and then I'd stop there, but apparently not. Anyway, arranged meetings, or at least that's what it sounds like. That should be a fun one. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time for more Umineko. Bye!